Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, today's the day, and we've been anticipating this now for several weeks and through a number of podcasts. Today is the day of the presidential election in Moldova,
And referendum.
and exactly, which by happenstance the Moldovan government managed to make them on the same day. Of course, that wasn't in any way inappropriate election interference, but two separate issues, and you have it on the same day. Um, the media and, of course, the Western governments, and that it's almost like a redundancy to mention as if they're two separate entities, have gone into absolute meltdown, hysterical mode about this election and the referendum, which is very, very strange. And Moldova is an extremely small country. It's a population of about 2.5 million.
And
And
very, very poor.
it's very, very poor. And yet it's become a matter of complete obsession in Western circles because, of course, that, as we know, if they don't really care about the lives of Ukrainians, or even less will they care about the lives of Moldovans. But they do see Moldova as a weapon to go after Russia. And so, in this election, they are crying that Russia is intervening, and interfering in
Well,
this
it
election.
also, before we get started here, um, a false dichotomy is always presented in Western media. Is that, let's say, for example, a Moldovan voter votes against a referendum about going down the path of the EU. That's automatically deemed pro-Russian, which is completely illogical.
Completely logical.
There's nothing to do with each other. Okay.
That's right.
A lot of Moldovans will look at the problems that Hungary and Slovakia are having, and because
Right.
when the EU, it's a pretty big package deal.
Right.
Okay, I mean, you the allure of being modern and
Right.
rich,
Right.
but your values, well, you won't have any more values.
That's right.
They'll be sent to you. There'll be text message to you, maybe on WhatsApp, maybe Telegram, of what your new values are.
That's right.
Of course, there's always an element of levity here, but there is a demonstration effect. It's like, yeah, this is a package deal.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get rich because the EU, they stopped when it was in the very, very early days of the EU, they had a little bit of money to throw around,
Right.
okay, for development and stuff like that. They have much less to do with the money
Right.
now. Of course, money goes to Ukraine,
Right.
but unless the Moldovans want to bring the war to their doorstep and into their living room, well, maybe they'll get a lot of money, but Moldovans won't get that money.
Right.
Others will.
No, that's right. The other thing is that Moldova, like Ukraine, and of course like Yugoslavia, a generation ago, is very divided. There are many different groups and nationalities in Moldova. However small it is, it's nonetheless a very divided place. And by doing the whole pro-Western, pro-EU, pro-NATO stance, you're siding with one bunch of people and against another. And that, of course, fuels all sorts of problems, as it did in Ukraine, by the fact when the West intervened on one side and therefore against another side, you kind of created a civil war, as he was bound to do. You did that in Yugoslavia as well by deciding, well, we're going to break up Yugoslavia. Well, you went in favor of the separatists, and then you went against the Serb core of Yugoslavia. Again, it was bound to end up in a civil war. So this is the West has always played this. And where the media go on about, oh, it's pro-Western, pro-EU, but they ignore the fact, yeah, but what about those who are not pro-West or pro-EU, who don't want to be absorbed into the West and the EU and NATO? Well, they're just simply, they're the bad guys. They're just listening to Putin.
They're
Um,
the Moldovan version of the deplorables.
exactly. So here was here's a typical headline from again from Politico, because of course the Politico has been the worst in all of this. Moldova faces existential existential EU vote in face of Russian interference. So don't tell us what to think. Please don't tell exactly what we're supposed to think. Moscow is using cash and fear in an attempt to regain control of the former Soviet republic. So regain control. Yeah.
There is no evidence for the
None,
subtitle
none, none,
whatsoever.
none whatever. Um, and then it says more than 1 million Moldovans will cast ballots on whether to join the EU on Sunday in a referendum that could pave the way to becoming a member of the bloc or see the East European nation pulled back into Russia's orbit. Oh.
It's kind of like The Sopranos. They pulled me back.
That's right. They pull you exactly. Yes. Yeah, that was actually The Godfather 3.
Yeah, but
Just when I thought I'm out,
just
they
but then
pull.
The Sopranos did a parody on it, so we
Oh,
both.
a victory for the pro-Western government would be a blow for Moscow's influence in the region, but would also increase pressure on Brussels to move ahead with the accession process, despite serious practical
But
concern.
again, that is a misframing here. Okay, a blow to Moscow's influence in the region. Well, Moldova doesn't bring much to the table. A
No.
lot of Moldovans work in Russia
Yep.
because the economy in Moldova is so bad.
Right.
Remittances are a good part of the economy.
Right.
I mean, if Moldova in this Western tilt were to seriously entertain NATO membership, yeah, you're gonna have trouble. Yep, no
Right.
doubt about it.
Right.
But other than that, the Moscow's concern is not at the level that these people always. It's always zero sum, zero sum. No,
Right.
Moldova is not going anywhere.
Right.
Okay,
Right. No,
and
yeah, that's right.
and 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 with the presidential election, where was I remember before anti-corruption was the big campaign issue. Where
Yeah.
is it now,
Wait,
George?
what happened to that? Yeah.
What
That,
happened to that?
that's right. That's right.
Maybe that's a lot of people say this is a lot of hogwash we get from this Western puppet. And what are the results? No, you've made your masters in
Right.
Brussels and Washington happy,
Yes.
but you haven't done much for the people. And
That's
that's what's on the agenda. That's what's on the ballot.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. So but Moldova and Georgia. So again, you can see that NATO just simply continues along this path of trying to use the on Russia's periphery, the former republics of the Soviet Union, trying to use them against Russia, and then they turn out, so weren't us, we're not doing anything. Oh, we're kind of innocent. We're just innocent bystanders. It's Russia that's behaving so unreasonably. But what you're doing is entirely aggressive. You've moved into these countries. You're going against the wishes of a very substantial portion of those populations. And we talked about Georgia. We'll probably talk about Georgia again during the week. And you're trying to ram an agenda down their throats for one reason only, because you want to use them against Russia. Um, and then so it goes on. This, and then they quote this Moldova's deputy prime minister and EU integration chief. This is a historic decision for us, maybe the most important one since we gained independence from the Soviet Union. For us, EU membership is existential. It's the only way to consolidate our democracy. There is no plan B. Russia and the future it wants for us is no alternative. Um, and then again, she goes on. We are seeing the classic hybrid toolbox Russia uses to influence elections. I like having a hybrid toolbox, but the magnitude is really unprecedented. We see hybrid attacks on public institutions responsible for critical service like the post office and the airport. We see vote buying. We see the use of local corrupt proxies and political parties. They're given cash to destabilize the situation on the ground. The interesting thing is they never really come up with any evidence for this. I mean, but they list all these things, and the media just simply report all this. Oh, Russian interference is just absolutely unprecedented.
So the post office is having problems. That's Russia's fault?
The airport, planes are not arriving on time or not leaving on time. It's Russia's fault. Um, And then we have another article in Politico. Politico's just gone absolutely haywire.
On this one, yeah.
US works to counter Russian interference in Moldovan elections. Multiple US agencies are supporting the Moldovan government in defending against cyber attacks and disinformation from Russia aimed at interfering in Moldovan elections. And and then it says the Biden administration has been pouring resources into countering Russian efforts to influence the weekend's national elections in Moldova. Now, notice they've been pouring resources. So, who's interfering in the election exactly? I mean, they're
And
pouring resources. That's
what is
okay,
the,
apparently. When America pours in resources, that's not interference in the election.
well, I think in the Moldovan context, resources means cash.
I would have thought,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a lot of it. I mean, they're pouring in. Again, it's a poor country, and it's 2.5 million. So, U.S. dollars can go a long way in Moldova.
So who's meddling in this election?
Exactly, who's meddling? Moldova has been besieged with disinformation, cyber attacks, and influence campaigns linked to Russia in the months leading up to Sunday vote, in
Stop,
which
rephrase. Moldova has been besieged with disinformation, cyber attacks, and influence campaigns linked to the United States.
exactly, exactly. Um, and then it goes on. In response, the US, the EU, and NATO has sent advisors. Oh, they've
What,
sent
why
that
NATO?
also is not interference.
Why is NATO sending advisors?
That's a very good question because again, Moldova, according to its constitution, is supposed to be neutral. Suppose neutrality is in its constitution.
Oh, this is the hybrid toolbox.
This is the hybrid. It's very hybrid, yeah, hybrid toolbox.
What is
Um,
everybody? What does NATO have to do with this election in Moldova?
that's right. That's right.
Oh, unless it's all about NATO.
Exactly. Have sent advisors and shared threat information and tips on how to counter efforts to drive an outcome favorable to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Has nothing to do with the people voting
No,
against the
nothing at all.
EU. It has nothing to do with that, right?
That's right.
Really?
That's right.
Very
How to
few
it's always we're always countering. It's always this is the NATO talk. Everything's always countering. We're always on the defensive. It's not no. It looks on the face of it that hey, you're actually moving into a country that's supposed to be neutral. You're pouring in resources into countries neutral, and then you're doing the same thing in Georgia. You did the same thing in Ukraine. But no, no, no. We're just being defensive. Everything we do is defensive.
very low opinion of democracy.
That's right. US officials and lawmakers say the Moldovan elections serve as a reminder that Russia is actively working to influence votes abroad in ways that can undermine global alliances.
Just like how British canvassers.
That's right. And then they quote this horrible creature, Mark Warner of Russiagate fame. Russian malign actors. I mean, Russia cannot have anyone actors who are not malign. I mean, it's always malign. Target more than just US election and have made a concerted effort to shape outcomes in elections of key US partners. When did Moldova become a key US partner? It's kind of an interesting, again,
Do you
here's this.
think do you think Mark Warner could find it on a map?
No, no,
No.
no. And then here we are, and Moldova is at a crossroads. It's deciding whether to move into the Western orbit or shift more towards Moscow. And again, Moldova isn't really making a decision. I mean, this decision is being made for Moldova by the US, EU, and NATO, and Mark Warner and all the politicians. They're making the decision. They say, well, Moldova's making the decision. No, we're making that decision for Moldova.
And knowing the people in this part of the world, George, I can bet you my bottom dollar. Most just want a better life.
That's right.
That's
That's right.
about what they want.
Well,
Okay.
but that's of course.
Not going to the West, not going to the East. They would like maybe the corruption to be cut down, maybe more opportunities, more investment in public
Right.
sector.
That's
You know,
right.
that's kind of the stuff people want.
But that's why this whole EU thing, and he played the same role in Ukraine, which is, hey, well, hey, if we go in the EU, they're going to give us lots and lots of money. That's really what the EU means to them, and that's why this Maya Sandu chose to have the presidential election and the EU referendum on the same day. So you're going to people who are going to say, hey, where's the money from the EU? Like Yanukovych, it was kind of, hey, how much money am I getting from the EU? And so we're going to get all this money. They don't care about her. They don't like her. But if you have it on the same day, they're going to vote for her.
Look at the association agreement that Yanukovych was confronted with. Look it up.
Yeah,
It's on the internet. You can read
yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely.
There's no money.
Right.
There was no money for
There was no
Ukraine
money. There was no money. Yeah.
at all. And that's one of the reasons why Yanukovych said, hey, I got to think about this here.
Right,
You're basically you want me to mortgage the entire country, and we're not going to get any spending money in the
right,
process.
right.
Not a good deal.
No,
The
of course,
same is what Moldova faces as well.
exactly.
And there are people in Moldova that know that.
That's right. But the outcome of the election will not just determine the nation's future, it also demonstrates how far Russia will go to expand its influence in Europe beyond Ukraine.
Yes, but just a few slides ago, George, it also demonstrates how far the U.S. will go to expand its influence in Europe.
That's right. Exactly. And then it goes on. Moldova also is being closely watched by Western allies as a bellwether for how Russia may attempt to interfere in other elections in Europe to sway the outcome of the war in Europe.
We've
Amazing how.
never seen any evidence for it over and over and over again.
Yeah, they always trot every single election. They always trot out Russia, but they never come up with any evidence. We have the same with German elections. Oh yeah, Russian interference. French elections, Russian interference. Where is it? Where's the evidence for this? Um, as in the US, efforts to skew the votes in Moldova have been underway for months. I like this as in the US. You haven't proven anything. Why say as in the US as if this is something that's established? As in the US, the efforts to skew the votes in Moldova have been underway for months and have not let up despite efforts by Moldova's Western allies to call Moscow to account. And then John Kirby, Russia's working actively to undermine Moldova's election and its European integration.
Yeah, the same John Kirby that says genocide isn't happening
That's
in
exactly. Um, and then yet another Politico article: artificial crowds, artificial crowds in
Oh, we
Russia.
talked about this one. This is a fun one. We talked about this. Yeah.
Yes, in Russia aim to disrupt EU referendum. Moldova warns. The Kremlin has been accused of vote buying and using proxies to influence the outcome of the vote in Moldova. And then again, Russia is bussing in thousands of voters to overseas polling stations in a bid to influence Sunday's critical presidential election and EU referendum in Moldova, according to allegations by Moldovan.
Well, I mean, you can read this in a number of ways. Okay, let's assume it's true. I'm dubious anyway. But Russia is busing in thousands of voters at overseas polling stations in a bid to influence Sunday's critical presidential. Well, isn't Russia promoting democracy here?
You're absolutely right. That's absolutely right. But as we'll see, um, Moldova's, even though there are many, many Moldovans living and working in Russia, Moldova has made sure to have very, very few polling stations in Russia for these people. I mean, they make sure of that. There are far more polling stations in Italy, in everywhere else. In Russia, there are only two polling stations. Almost 900,000 people have already voted in the countrywide poll in which pro-Western President Maya Sandu is seeking re-election. Citizens are also being asked to cast ballots on joining the EU. And then it goes on. However, two polling stations established in Russia to count the votes of Moldovans living in that country have seen huge numbers of people lining up outside. Well, if you only have two, and there's so many Moldovans living in Russia, there's going to be huge numbers of people lining up outside with pro-Kremlin social media accounts posting clips of them singing Soviet-era patriotic songs as they wait. Now, I looked at this link, and what they were singing was Katyusha. Now, Katyusha is not really, I mean, it's a World War II song. It became very famous it's associated with the Red Army. There's been the song Katyusha, and kind of beloved song, but it's about
It's really catchy, everyone.
it's
It's
very
really
catchy, and it's basically it's about a Russian woman
yeah.
waiting for her man to come home. But as you say, it's very catchy. Um,
Everyone, you've absolutely 100% everyone has heard it before.
yes,
And the song the West is kind of appropriated um, to mark Russia.
yeah,
I can't find the right term, but it's kind of one of those, like negatively, it's like a bottle of vodka, a bear,
right,
and this song.
right.
Okay, this is
It's the kind of signature song of Russia. Yeah,
signature. That's what I want.
yeah, yeah. That's right.
But
Um, And yeah, exactly. And in the days when there was still nostalgia for World War II, they would often bring on, I remember in Britain, you'd have, Soviet singers, they'd come from the Soviet Union, they would sing Katyusha and everybody would love it, because it reminded them of happier days in World War II. Um, and so it's but they want to make it Soviet era, they were singing songs celebrating Stalin. Um, and then it says in a statement hours after polls opened on Sunday, Moldova's foreign ministry warned that the throngs of voters could be, quote, a result of attempts to organize illegal transportation of voters to the polling stations. I was kind of wondering again, how is it illegal? What's illegal? Are they going to go and vote? I mean, what's illegal about transporting voters? We believe that the crowds at two polling stations in Russia have been artificially created to jeopardize the electoral process. Yeah, because they're not going
believing
to
in
vote your way.
Yeah, but believing and knowing are two different things. All right.
You're right. Then he says, this is very interesting. The two overseas polling stations were set up to allow Moldovans in Russia to take part in the election and referendum. Again, why only two? Um, and then it goes on. And then this is to pass. At least 33% of eligible voters must cast ballots in the presidential election. And and then again, you have to that figure has already been reached with an announcement of whether the referendum has met the threshold. And then he says, this is very interesting. As many as 1.2 million Moldovans live abroad, compared
Yep.
to the country's population of 2.5 million.
Why is that, everyone? Why 1.2 million people of a country's population of 2.5? That should tell you something. Why aren't they in their country?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Meaning that the diaspora vote will play a critical role in Sunday's results. But the two polling stations in Russia have only 5,000 ballot papers each. Well, that's very strange. And then he says, in line with the rules establishing a maximum, meaning many of those queuing in Moscow could be unable to cast a ballot. Huh. Well, that's odd.
Open about the obstructing the democratic process.
Yeah,
At least,
exactly.
at least
But
they write
again,
it.
so they report this without batting an eyelid. So there's only 5,000 ballot papers in line with rules establishing a maximum,
Why
meaning many
the
of those
maximum?
queuing in. Yeah, why did you establish a maximum? I mean, you don't establish a maximum. You basically have a sense of how many are going to show up, and you want to have as many ballots as possible to meet to meet the demand. Um, so meaning many of those queuing in Moscow could be unable to cast a ballot. And again, Politico doesn't seem to think there's anything anything wrong with that. People eligible to vote will not be able to vote. Um, and then now this is very interesting. There's an article. This is written by a Hungarian, Varga George, who was Hungary's ambassador to Moldova. I posted this article on our locals page, and he gives a very different perspective on Moldova. It's very different from the standard presentation. Again, this is somebody who knows Moldova. He was the ambassador there, and he says how the population of a constitutionally neutral country is fighting to preserve its sovereignty against the US and EU and their local lackeys. And then the country which gained independence in 1991 actively participated in cooperation with the Commonwealth of Independent States after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and in the early 2000s, the rapprochement between EU and Chisinau began. The relatively balanced rivalry between the two vectors was present from the very beginning, ensuring the exclusive assertion of one vector became the main trend only from 2020 due to the Moldova policy of the global West, which thinks in terms of geopolitical expansion. 2020 is, of course, when Maya Sandu became president. And then the militarization of the Republic of Moldova has been going on since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Since the country with a population of 2.5 million has only Romania and Ukraine as neighbors, whose military potential outweighs Moldova's by several orders of magnitude, its militarization by NATO serves solely to dismantle neutrality. Logistically, the country has become a staging point for the global West. According to former head of state Igor Dodon, part of NATO supplies from Romania reach Ukraine via the Republic of Moldova. Since 2022, dozens of military exercises with troops from NATO countries have been held in Moldova. So this is kind of interesting. You're doing all this. It's supposed to be neutral, constitutionally neutral. It's in the Constitution. It was part of the kind of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and yet NATO has clearly violated its constitution. It's shipping arms from Romania to Ukraine via Moldova. And again, you have all these military exercises that are taking place in Moldova. Following the EU's example, the Moldovan government has suspended flights to Russia and money transfers, despite the fact that more than 500,000 of its citizens work in Russia.
People have workarounds on that.
Well, they probably do, but nonetheless,
yeah.
Moldova has pursued a policy that is contrary to the interests of its people. And again, contrary to the neutrality. I mean, it's supposed to be neutral. So why exactly is it now pursuing this a foreign policy dictated by the EU? And then according to Dodon, over 10,000 Western NGOs operate in Moldova, while sources from the post-Soviet space and Russian media have been banned by the government. This happened despite the fact that the role of the US and Western Europe seems negligible in terms of a common past, language, culture, religion, kinship, and friendship. Russian language news broadcasts are unavailable, and internet algorithms allow searching in Russian only among sources supportive of the Western narrative, despite the fact that the Russian language is protected by the Constitution as a lingua franca among all ethnic groups in Moldova. And then the new name for censorship is the fight against Russian disinformation, which is unacceptable in a constitutionally neutral country for a population that generally uses the Russian language. The fight against alleged disinformation is seen as a means of gaining Western control over Moldovan statehood. Yeah, that's what the fight against alleged disinformation is about. The US, Georgian, and Hungarian laws protecting sovereignty serve as a model for some political forces in Moldova. Foreign funding should be transparent, and foreign actors should not decide the future of sovereign countries through elections. And then the Moldovan power elite has no interest in such an arrangement. And moreover, the global West would not allow transparency in the relationship between the funds it provides and political influence. This is evidenced, for example, by the pressure exerted by the US and EU on the Hungarian and Georgian governments, as recently demonstrated by the European Parliament's October the 8th resolution condemning Georgia. And then 11 people have been registered as candidates for the post of head of state. Among the candidates are the current head of state, Maya Sandu, and 10 opposition candidates, such as former prosecutor, blah, blah, and then lists some of these people. And then it goes on, 40% of the working age population lives abroad and had until September the 6th to register to vote. Logically, most people registered from Russia, 38%, followed by those living in Italy, 11.5%, Germany, 9%, US, 6.6%, Romania, 5%. Despite this, only 2 polling stations are open in Russia. Only 2. While there are 60 in Italy, 26 in Germany, 20 in France, 17 in the United Kingdom, 16 in Romania, 16 in the United States, 11 in Spain, 10 in Ireland, and 6 in Portugal. OSCE election experts are likely to classify the election as free and fair, don't they always? And then the ruling elite makes no secret of the fact that the referendum on EU accession could have a mobilizing force behind the current leader, who has already enjoyed the support of the political West throughout the term. Again, no one's raising that issue that this is an unfair tilting of the election in favor of the government by having the referendum and the presidential election on the same day. The opposition sees the timing of the referendum as a tool to influence the elections, since a fundamental motivation for all Moldovan citizens is an EU standard of living that may be achieved at some point, although they have certain fears. And then the militarization of Europe and the EU is alarming for Moldovan people who are dependent on Russia in many areas and have common interests in all spheres of life. Moldovans see that even neutral Austria, as an EU member, is forced to pursue a foreign and security policy that calls into question the very essence of its constitutional neutrality. You know, that is an outrage. And we did a podcast on that a while ago. But the fact is that the EU has been violating something that was agreed upon as part of the 1955 neutrality agreement on Austria. And this is always the case with the West. They always just break every single agreement. You know, they say, well, we'll just ignore that. But what they've done with Austria is a clear violation of what Austria is supposed to do. For years before becoming members of NATO, Finland and Sweden were unable to pursue a neutral foreign policy, as is already the case in Moldova. Mandatory participation in sanctions, joint declarations, militarization. Moldova's neutrality and statehood increasingly depend on the restraint of the political West, which is a rather weak guarantee. In the October 20th elections for head of state, one candidate is running with the support of the global West, namely the current head of state. 10 candidates are running with opposition party programs or individual programs in favor of a neutral country thriving between East and West. Together, they have much more support than the current head of state, who is seeking another term. The question is whether the 10 opposition candidates for the post of head of state will be able to form a common platform and rally their voters behind the candidate who will reach the second round on November the 3rd, or whether the process of abandoning Moldovan statehood will continue under Maia Sandu. And then the US is developing this huge airbase. Again, we talked about that in Romania, 100 kilometers from the Moldovan border. It's the largest US base in Europe. It'll be twice the size of Ramstein in Germany. Part of a 2.7 billion project that aims to provide the US with permanent strategic access to the Black Sea region. But NATO is defensive. We're purely defensive. This is defensive. So permanent strategic access to the Black Sea region. The scale of the investment leaves no doubt about the importance of the US strategic goals in the region, which Romanian diplomacy is effectively using. It's achieving its Moldovan goals with US and EU funds and EU projects, the elimination of Moldovan neutrality and statehood in the interest of the global West in order to conquer more territory near Russia. And then he says, on October the 8th, the European Parliament, referring to the report of the head of the Moldovan Secret Service, a Romanian citizen, adopted a resolution condemning foreign interference and in the internal and foreign political processes of the Republic of Moldova. And then, as readers have probably guessed, it was not Romanian interference that was condemned, but Russian interference and that of Putin's friends, i.e., the leadership of the Autonomous Republic of Gagauzia.
Gauzy, our favorite
Our
place.
favorite place, exactly. According to the European Parliament statement, the sovereignty, statehood, and neutrality of Moldova must be protected from these people. Poor MEPs, how could they know that the people of Gagauzia love their homeland much more and defend the neutrality and statehood of Moldova better than some of the representatives of the political elite mentioned at the beginning of the article? Anyway, that's the highlights. It's a long article, and I think people should actually read the entire article. It's quite
Really, really quite brilliant. I really enjoyed that.
yeah,
That's
exactly. It's absolutely very enjoyable. A completely different perspective. And again, this is from a diplomat, a Hungarian diplomat who was in Moldova, so he knows Moldova well. And he's giving me and you say that's what it is in Moldova. You basically are destroying the statehood. They're basically destroying completely any independence, any sovereignty, and then they accuse Russia of doing precisely what they are doing. And that's how they conceal what the agenda is by just leveling all these ridiculous accusations at
and what
Russia.
will happen if the West prevails? I've looked at various reports. It's very difficult to determine what the outcome here. But George, let's say hypothetically, the president is reelected. I think she's going to have to go to a second round. But anyway, and the EU referendum passes. What happens 15 seconds after? NATO membership.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They're going to change the constitution just like they changed the constitution in Ukraine. And remember, Ukraine was supposed to be neutral. Okay, when at the moment of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, its declaration of independence and its constitution made clear Ukraine would be neutral. They would not join any military alliances, and that was very important. I mean, because they knew right there and then that Russia would take it very much amiss if somehow Ukraine were to join a hostile military alliance. And so it was there in the very basis of the foundation of the state of Ukraine. And then NATO just ran roughshod right over that. So, we're being defensive. We're defensive. No one can tell other countries what to do. Well, except we can. We can tell other countries what to. No one can tell Ukraine what to do. In other words, basically, we're just going to use states to wage these permanent wars. We're just going to continue to wage these permanent wars against other states through this ridiculous NATO membership and NATO expansion. So you're absolutely right. That it is going to be 15 seconds afterwards. Hey, NATO membership.
I don't think anyone is given such a juxtaposition. First, you have this garbage coming out of Politico. I
Right.
mean, it shows the geopolitical imperative. I mean, Politico puts a lot of resources into this. Okay, they're following the script to the letter. But the diaspora. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of interested in this because I know Moldovans. They're around me. I see them working. They work in shops. They do construction. There's a lot of Moldovans here, and it's the West that has made their life more difficult because they can't. The remittances they have problems. Oh, they have plenty of ways of
Right. Right.
going. Okay, I
Right.
mean, they have to spend more of their hard-earned money to get their money back to their relatives because the economy is permanently on its back, permanently.
Right.
And do you think the EU, you think they're going to develop one of the poorest countries in Europe? No, no, it's a segue for NATO membership. That's what's most important.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, yeah, okay, they'll have a huge NATO military base. Maybe some people get work there. Okay, that's their jobs
Right.
initiative.
Yeah, no question. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And he kind of spells this out. It's creating a NATO infrastructure right up to Odessa. That's the plan. You're from Romania through Moldova to Odessa. That's the NATO plan. And that's why the Americans are building this massive base in Romania, much bigger than anything I've got in Germany. Now, why are they doing this? Well, for obvious reasons. It's a clearly an attempt to constrain and encircle Russia with really serious military hardware. That's where Moldova comes. That's the only interest they have in Moldova. Nice, vital piece of real estate
at the expense of the Moldovan people.
at the expense. And it's just like the thing you said about the through these money transfers. The fact that Moldova did this, clearly harming its own people, making it more difficult for them to send money home, which is the whole point of their working abroad. I mean, why would anyone want to work
Well,
abroad other
and
than to send
everybody,
money home?
the benevolence that Russia has towards Moldova. Well, number one, why do so many Moldovans come here? Okay, why has Russia allowed them to send their money? They could put a tax on it. They could say, you worked it here, you have to pay a tax. They don't do that at all. Okay, I mean, the West has all of its fancy words, but Russia is the country that helps Moldova the most.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. You're absolutely right. Because that's where they're working mostly, but they make sure that, we only have two polling stations and only a limited number of ballots. But it's Russia that's helping the most. And again, this becomes transformed in the Western media. Somehow Russia is hurting, hindering, thwarting Moldova. It's all just completely made up. It's made up out of whole cloth, and it's just then regurgitating, but with the Russian threat. But as you say, Russia is the only country that is actually helping Moldovans. They're benefiting exclusively from Russia.
Has Russia put any sanctions on Moldova? Not that I'm aware of. Is it blockaded Moldova? Not that I'm aware of. Has
Well,
it
they,
stopped?
they did tell them that you have to pay market prices, but that was by choice of Maya
Well,
Sandu's
they
government.
went to the spot market,
They
okay?
want a spot market, exactly. You have to you made a gamble and you gambled wrong, so you pay the price. I mean that's the way it works. I mean, you had the
And
opportunity to sign a long-term contract.
everybody, you're all aware that there's a conflict going on in Ukraine, but Russian gas is still going through Ukraine.
Yeah,
Why? Because it was done under a long-term contract. Russia is obligated. Now, the Ukrainians could shut it off, but that's not Russia's fault, okay? But on the spot market, you get screwed because the price goes up. But
right,
because of the gas that is currently going through, it was through a long-term contract. You got to fulfill your obligations in the middle of a war.
right.
But the Moldovan government, at the behest of Brussels and the United States, no, 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 no. No, you have to pay. That's the Western way. The modern way is to do spot market like the rest of us here.
Right.
And then when the war starts in Ukraine, prices go up, the supply goes down, demand is all over the place, and one of the poorest countries in Europe gets the shortest end of the
Right.
stick. But that was an elite choice.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. No, but it's very interesting about the long-term contracts, why Russia continues to do this, because a lot of people are very puzzled about it, including myself. Why they continue to do it. You're continuing to supply energy to countries that are plotting against you, that are actually arming Ukraine. But you're right. That's the explanation. It's a long-term contract. Well, we got to fulfill our
Well, I'm trying to remember who explained to me. It was an Eastern European emigre, and he said, the Russians, they have this thing about contracts. When
Yeah.
you sign something, it's on paper.
Right.
This has got a stamp on it. Well,
Right.
got to do it. Got to do it. It's a very interesting mindset. Geopolitically, George is right. I mean, yeah, you're lobbing missiles into our country.
And we're
Why should
supplying
we
you with
send you
energy. Yeah.
anything?
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway,
Uh,
all right. I'm sure George and I will mention this tomorrow during our.
Absolutely. Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Unlike the United States, I think Moldova will know its election result later
Yeah,
today.
exactly. Yes, that's right. I think they'll know, later on this evening. No, in the United States, it's supposedly normal. It's perfectly normal for elections to go on for months. Apparently, that's nice. It's the new normal in the United States.
Yeah, I guess
Months
they'll start
before the
calling it.
election and then months afterwards.
We don't want, we no longer have election day. We have election month.
Yeah, yeah, months and months because I mean, they've been starting voting already a while ago in a number of states, and then of course, you're going to have all the litigation and the fights after the election because election day just doesn't really mean very much. So yeah, it's a long, long process. That's the new normal.
Well, also, just as a quick preview, if the Western stratagem goes south, George and I will be reporting on rent-a-crowds in Violent.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Okay, because if they don't get their way, fraud,
That's right.
fraud.
That's
Okay,
right. Exactly.
it's already they're
That's right.
waiting. You know.
Exactly. And we're going to do it next week, of course, is the Georgia election. And that's where I think we can really get the renter crowd is really
Well, that's
out
when
there.
the shit is going to hit the fan.
That's right.
Okay. In all fairness, everyone, I remember the author's name, but there's a good piece at Responsible Statecraft. Got to give credit where credit's due. Good piece on warning about Western meddling in the Georgian election. It's because it's only going to go south for those
Yes.
people. Interesting piece. Check it out. All right, everybody. This is the Goggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegoggle.locals.com. As I just mentioned, we do live streams tomorrow.
Live stream 10 a.m. Eastern time. Please join us. Come with questions. We love questions. Have a few questions already prepared by tomorrow morning, well, morning Eastern time. As many as possible because we really enjoy addressing issues. And then, got to think about, well, very good of you to make an appearance. So the Dachshund, is thinking, hey, what about Germany? Why isn't, he's got an attachment to Germany. Why doesn't Germany come up ever in these discussions? So if you have a few bob in your pocket, whip them out, dunk them into the tip jar. It just puts them in a better mood. Talking, hey, well, why aren't we talking Mexico, Germany? Here we go. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, we'll put these dogs into a better mood. They're really very, very angry about the way things are going. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.